great. I'd like to welcome Amelia Cavallo. Amelia, hi. We've worked together off and on over the years. It's lovely to see you here. I mean, you've worked all over the world. You're a very experienced performer and musician and aerialist, darling, multi-talented. You're a visually impaired woman. Mm-hmm. I just wondered how you started off in the business.
I started off in the business in this country, in the UK, by going to drama school, which is a path that a lot of deaf and disabled people don't get. And I somehow managed to weasel my way in and was trained in a very kind of quote-unquote mainstream space and was taught to believe that I should behave like mainstream people. And then, of course, the second I went to go get work, nobody cast me because I'm blind. And so I ended up very quickly following and working with companies like Extant Theatre in London, which are one of the UK's first and foremost blind and visually impaired run theatre companies. I worked with Grey Eye, I worked with Mind the Gap, and these companies, and I also did a lot of making my own work and finding my way into the more sort of subversive sides of performance, so doing cabaret, doing burlesque, because those were less directly disability-led spaces that would just kind of open their doors to more people, and just worked my tail off to build up as much experience as I could that way. And it was companies like Extant and Grey Eye that really boosted and supported me and helped me hone my craft a lot, helped me hone my politics a lot as well as a disabled woman, and really they're the reason I'm still working, I would say.
That's great. I mean, we've heard a lot about Grey Eye in Scotland, but to tell us a bit more about Extant.
So yeah, Extant is a wonderful company. It's as I said, the UK's, I think now they're classing themselves as the leading blind and visually impaired led theatre company. For a while they were the only one, and now there's a few others, including Salamander Tandem, which is somewhere based in the middle of the in the middle of England, that are quite cool as well. And Extant has been run by a really lovely and very strong-willed artistic director named Maria Shoddy, and she's been running it for I think 20 years now. And they started off very much looking at different ways of using really audio description and access in different types of immersive theatre. So a lot of the stuff that they do will mix various forms. So, for example, they did a show called Flatland that was kind of part theatrical performance and part installation. That was completely theatre in the dark. It was immersive. There were a lot of kind of set pieces / art pieces that you could touch and interact with, and when you did, sounds would come out of them and smells would come out of them and stuff like that. They also like to really play in challenging spaces for blind and visually impaired people, meaning working with really visual types of performance like burlesque or aerial circus, and finding ways of making that accessible for the performers and for blind and visually impaired people in a way that supports anyone and everyone who can be in that space. And it's they are the only company that I know of that are doing exactly what they're doing, and they're very exciting.
That's brilliant. What your background is, obviously you're American, clearly.
For my sins.
Did you start off performing at an early age?
I started off as a musician. I think my dad had dreams for his children for us to both be skiers and to both be piano players, and my sister and I took up snowboarding, and I'm the only musician, but he got 1 out of 4. So I've been literally playing the piano since I could move my fingers, and then when I was very young, was really on a track to become a classical pianist, and then also was in choirs and sang and things like that. And then I don't know, I discovered Tori Amos and went, oh, you can do that with the piano, and kind of changed my mind a little bit and decided I wanted to do things a little bit more I guess freely, and then did that for a long time and really thought my track was going to be as a musician. And then when I was in high school, fell into a drama class because I needed an extra and I needed an extra activity on my schedule, and just went into that class and found all of these kooky, loud, extroverted beings, and went, oh, I'm home. And that was kind of fate for me from that point. I just went, well, these are the things I'm going to do. And then worked extensively. New Mexico doesn't really have a professional theater space in itself. They've got a really thriving community theater space, but they don't have, you can't be a working actor there and really make money. So I did a lot of stuff statewide around performance there, and then started my professional career in the UK, which was kind of not really planned, but it just ended up happening that way, which I'm very happy about because I like it here.
That's great. We like having you here.
Thank you.
Even on a cold Castle Douglas.
It's lovely.
It is beautiful. Just quickly, so what's the difference, would you say, between deaf and disability work in the United States and in the UK?
Ooh, okay.
Or is there a difference? I don't know.
I think the thing, and I mean, this is deaf and disability-led stuff, but I think it's also theater in general, because the United States is so big. It's so big that it's hard. What you end up getting is kind of regions of stuff. So if you go to New York, a lot of stuff is going to be influenced by Broadway, for example. So you'll go and find companies like Theater Breaking Through Barriers, which they just do like super slick off-Broadway performances that are really fun to watch, but are a very different style to, say, Sin's Invalid in Berkeley, California, which are super subversive, queer, just hardcore, like, people do crazy stuff in their shows, and it's beautiful, but it's a very different audience space, and a very different political standpoint as far as exposure. Whereas in the UK, I think you get a lot of that kind of stuff, but because you're on one island that, like, to put it in perspective, would fit in New Mexico more than once.
Right.
We're all a lot closer to each other, so the ability to connect becomes a little bit easier, so things mush and meld more, which is really useful, I think, because it makes the community, it makes you aware of a community outside of your city. So I don't feel separate from, Birds of Paradise in Glasgow, even though I live in London, in the way that I think I would, Sin's Invalid, if I was living in New York and working with Breaking Through Barriers. So I think that's the real difference, is it's a geographical thing more than anything.
And there's a professional work in the States.
Oh yeah, there's it's a very different animal. There's also a lot of different rules about how you can be a professional performer in the States. So you have, like, we have equity here, but you kind of you don't have to be an equity member to get professional work. Whereas in the States, if you want to be in theater, you need to be a part of equity.
Right.
If you want to be on screen, you have to be a part of the Screen Actors Guild.
Gotcha.
And once you're in those unions, it's harder to get out of them. And so some of those rules and regulations around the union that actually protect the majority of performers can put up extra barriers for a lot of disabled ones, but I know that a lot of that's being addressed and looked at quite actively, and has been for a number of years. So, and there are loads of companies as well that are just, doing what every disability-led company, knows, where they just crop them. They're like, well, we're just going to do it ourselves because no one else is going to do it for us. Yeah.
Right. Amelia, that's lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No worries. That's fun.